Thank you for letting me go over my time.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your nomination. We are glad that you are here. I know you've done some work on tying benefits like the child tax credit to work. And I think if we are going to incentivize people to get into the workforce, we have to remove incentives that are keeping them out of the workforce. And I think we're all concerned about rampant fraud that we have seen in some of these programs, and especially from the pandemic. And of course, DOGE is helping to root that out. And getting the fraud out of benefits should be a first step when we look at making these programs solvent. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about what you would do to restore integrity in that benefit system and bring forth concepts like tying benefits to work that would help elevate our workforce participation rate.
Thank you, Senator. I agree with you that part of the objectives of the Secretary and the President are to root out the fraud that is in place, and that's why improving the payment systems so that departments and agencies responsible for implementation of programs have more tools to identify potential sources of fraud and reduce them. When it comes to benefits, I agree with you that ensuring that we don't create disincentives to work. It's important that we encourage people during their prime working years to continue to be part of the labor force, and what we don't want to do is create disincentives whereby they decide not to be in the labor force because of benefits. And so work requirements, I think, are a relevant and important component to include in those programs.
And let me ask you about some of these foreign tax schemes that we're seeing that I think are discriminatory in nature and hurtful to U.S. competitiveness. The OECD's Pillar 1, Pillar 2, the GMT, you're looking at U.S. companies paying nearly 40% of the burden when it comes to the Pillar 2 taxes. And you've got companies like China that, because they are state-owned, they're paying nothing. And of course, this hurts us. And also some countries that are putting in place DSTs, and that is something else that hurts us, disadvantaged us. Talk about what you can do to reassert U.S. leadership on the global stage in dealing with these unfair taxes.
Thank you, Senator. Yes. So Pillar 1, looking at digital service taxes at the OECD. Pillar 2, the global minimum tax. The concern we have is that both of them disproportionately targeted American firms, that there are not enough safeguards in those negotiations to recognize the tax structure that we have in the United States. That's why the President issued an executive order calling on Treasury to reevaluate our participation in these OECD negotiations and to make sure that any couple of things. Number one, that United States firms are not disproportionately discriminated against in the way that other countries tax U.S. multinational activities in those countries. And then second, we want to make sure that the sovereignty of the United States is retained here at home. It is not the case that global organizations set tax law. It is the United States Congress that sets tax law. And that's what was so discouraging about the approach the previous administration took to its negotiations with the OECD.
The previous administration also came up with the Corporate Transparency Act, the CTA, which broadly would have disadvantaged Main Street businesses, small business owners, burdened them with paperwork, and caused them to expose information that they ought not to have to expose. So I appreciate that the Trump administration and Treasury has withdrawn that. And I think it's important for Treasury to keep an eye on Main Street and small businesses. In that regard, what would your initiative be?
Right. So thank you, Senator. Secretary Bessent has expressed that it's critically important that Main Street have an opportunity to thrive, and that means finding the right balance between national security and burdens that we're imposing on America's small businesses. The largest businesses out there can afford all of the compliance activities and burdens that are imposed upon them. It's the smaller businesses that have a smaller customer base to spread those costs over that are harmed. And so that's why Treasury is going to reevaluate the rule that was implemented, the rules implementing CTA. We're going to reevaluate those to make sure that the right tailoring takes place.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr.